r/AskReddit. What is the funniest thing you've ever witnessed right in front of you? A few years ago I was playing Pictionary with my wife and her parents. When it was my turn I had to draw the bearded lady. I'm terrible at drawing. So I came up with some stick figure with boobs and a beard with a large triangle behind it. It was supposed to be a circus tent. Everyone starts guessing. But no one is close. Suddenly, my father-in-law jumps up and shouts vagina. Clitoris. Clitoris. He was so caught up in getting the right answer that he just kept shouting it. At this point, we all lost it. I have never laughed so hard in my life. My mother-in-law still has the bearded lady posted on her fridge. Edit. I was able to get the bearded lady scanned. Note my arrow in an attempt to point out the beard. Also, I should point out that my Phil was across from me. So it was upside down to him. Was at the movies with a buddy. He went to take a shit so I entered the stall right next to his for a reason I can't remember, then came right back out. A few seconds later this gigantic 300 pounds black fellow comes in and sits in the stall I was previously in. My buddy, who thinks I'm still in the stall, wipes his ass then starts waving the poop covered toilet paper to the guy in the stall. I've never seen anyone yell so many curse words in public before. While all this was happening I was on the bathroom floor crying and laughing harder than I ever have before. My university choir went to Finland one year, which was an amazing experience. The day we arrived, my brain was a bit foggy from the jet lag. But I wanted to take advantage of being there, so I went with my friends to explore Helsinki. I was walking down the street talking to one of my friends next to me when I walked straight into a pole. I wasn't hurt at all. Just surprised. But as I collected myself I noticed that the only person who had noticed aside from my friend was this random Finnish dude on the other side of the street who was intensely cracking up from what he had seen. I think the sight of him laughing uproariously at my stupid moment is one of the funniest sights I've ever seen. A very icy parking lot. And a bunch of high schoolers rushing to their car. I saw at least 20 people slip and fall that day. I really enjoy watching people fall. We had a Halloween party with a pinata. Because fucking candy. Anyway, one guy was dressed as Lieutenant Dangle. And one guy was dressed as the Hamburglar. Somebody knocked the pinata off the rope. And without missing a beat the Hamburglar picked up the pinata and took off. Dangle drew his gun and immediately gave chase, yelling into his fake police radio all the way down the street. In 8th grade I had a friend named Roland who was about 4 feet tall and another friend named Carl who was about 200 pounds and about 5 feet 7 inches. During lunch, in the cafeteria, Cole was getting his food and Roland noticed his sweatpants sitting on the bench. Roland put on Carl's sweatpants over his own clothes and proceeded to walk around with them pulled up over his head. Cole saw it and ran to catch Roland. We had tears in our eyes from laughing as Carl chased his own sweatpants around the cafeteria. My dad was at a stoplight in downtown Cleveland and some guy with sagging pants starts using the crosswalk. His pants were sagging so bad that halfway across the street they just fell off and he fell flat on his face. Some big 300+ pound dude was lambasting some girl for being too skinny and was saying you look like you need a freaking donut you twig. A little 8-year-old nearby said you ate them all. It would have been kinda funny regardless. But the fact it was such a young kid made it hilarious. Went sledding the other day. And some random dog took a major dump right at the bottom of the hill we were at. My friend screams up to warn everyone. Then points it out to let everyone know. One kid comes zooming down the hill. Realizes he's in the direct path of the shit pile. Tries to stop before he hits it. Bails right on top of it. And the smears a little path of it as he's trying to stop tumbling. In a flash he grabbed his sled. Then noped the fuck out. I didn't even see him leave. If he had just kept going he wouldn't have went right over it. And been totally fine. I named him Streaks. Maybe not the funniest. But this annoying little girl was weaving recklessly through a crowd of people at the mall. I could see the scene from above as I rode the escalator up. She tripped and fell and spilled her bag of Skittles all over the place, and particularly in front of a shoe store. As she got up, an employee standing at the front of the store told her in a heavy Indian accent, "Taste the rainbow." I was riding a bike with my friends and asked this old nice lady in an electric wheelchair if she would race me. She did. Edit. My two-wheeled transportation device was lawfully acquired by myself. I was walking through my neighborhood on a Sunday morning loudly singing Me Say Day, Me Say Day-O, and a Jamaican guy popped his head out of the trunk of a car and sang Daylight Come and One Go Home. He had been packing the trunk or something and I couldn't see him. It was wonderful. My brother was riding one of those pocket rocket things, and as he passed he gave me the finger, but then he rammed into a parked car, giving him a broken arm and the car a huge dent. By the way, the car was my parents' car. Good times. Once at college there was a nice spot on the walkway outside our dorm, covered in a light dusting of snow. My friends and I all slipped on our way home. Later from our common room window we saw others falling. Within half an hour, 11 of us had gathered around the windows with tea and popcorn, watching every single person who walked down that path fall or flailed crazily to keep from falling. One time a really tall guy wound up doing a chicken dance for about 7 feet, but managed to stay upright. At the end there was vigorous applause, but not from our room. We rushed outside, turned around, and saw that at least 4 other windows in our dorm had crowds gathered around them. We waved and eventually all gathered on the lawn for an impromptu falling party. I was driving in Buffalo, NY, and it was a total whiteout. One thing they say is never to stop in a whiteout, because a tractor trailer will just rear end you to hell. So I found a car and started riding his ass just because I could only see his brake lights when I was only inches from his bumper. Then the brake lights started flickering like a strobe light, and the car came to a stop. I didn't know what to do, so I got out of the car. There was this huge black guy standing there, and he yelled, "Yo man, I can't see shit." I laughed my ass off and took the lead for a while. Edit. Corrected spelling. Thanks autocorrect, sarcastic. And thanks Tarkinus, not. Walking home one night. Must have been 3 AM. Come around the corner and there's a skinny Chinese kid nailing a big native woman doggy style on the side of the road. She's moaning and all he says is "what's up" with the biggest grin on his face. We'll never forget it. A very large woman at a Scrabble tournament decided to loosen up before her first game. So as 100 people listened to the rules of the tournament, she got on the floor and started doing all kinds of stretching and aerobics. It wouldn't have been so bad if she wasn't 350 pounds and wearing a summer dress. I was traveling through the south a few years ago and eating at a restaurant on the side of the highway in the afternoon. As I turned around from the counter to walk to a table, a car came crashing through sitting area because it was rolling, flipping. It landed on its wheels and 2 grossly overweight African American women were sitting in the front seats. I stood there in shock, like everyone else, for a few seconds. As everything got quiet you could hear the driver yell out, "Oh hell no. I just got my hair did." Needless to say the 2 passengers were fine and no one got hurt in the restaurant. But I laughed for hours because the 2 ladies were all upset about their hair. Luckily the restaurant was mostly empty. A man walking down a street in Nick with only purple briefs on and a 3-foot long braid wrapped around his neck. Oh yeah. He had a satchel. Was playing soccer. My buddy and his brother were on opposing team. I was advancing towards their net and my buddy came at me from left. His brother on my right. When they both got close to kick the ball away from me, I stopped the ball. They both missed the ball and kicked each other in the shins. Bodies collided. Heads collided with a loud thunk. The way it all synchronized was so funny I couldn't continue running and just rolled on the floor laughing. I thought it was over, but then they both got mad at each other and started fist fighting. I was laughing so hard watching it all unfold in front of me, though I'm going to pass out. One of the funniest memories I have. One time, I was stuck in traffic with my parents, so I decided I'd make small talk by saying, "You know, they say that white cars are most likely to be involved in a car accident than any other color car." But right as I said that, 3 white cars got into an accident in the lane next to ours. Note, it wasn't a serious accident. The last car bumped the car in front, which bumped the car in front of that. My best friend and I are obsessed with ghost hunting. So we naturally went on the ghost tour that is offered in Old Town Albuquerque. NM. We were the only 2 locals. But there were about 7 people from Canada. We get to this haunted window in a building that is now a restaurant. However, we failed to realize we were the only 2 people standing in front of the window only about a foot away. As we listened to this ghost story, we were staring into this window without realizing the restaurant was still open. And bam, a lady basically runs past the window. We were so scared we were screaming at the top of our lungs. I couldn't move and my best friend grabs me around the waist and tries to run off with me. I'm 5 feet 9 inches and she's 5 feet 2 inches. It isn't until we finally get ourselves together that we look up and realize we scared one of the Canadian guys so badly he had taken off running and was now a block and a half away. The 3 of us looked really stupid. But it's still one of my favorite memories. My sister and 2 Cocker Spaniels were out back. Sliding glass door closed. The 2 dogs decide to run a full sprint inside. Bam, both dogs collide with the door. Then my unaware sister does the exact same thing. It all happened in about 6 seconds. Back in high school, we were all traipsing across the grounds to the exit gate at 3:30. Someone had forgotten to collect all of the balls from PE and they were just lying around on the path. One girl was too busy talking to her friend and didn't realize they were on the path. She stood on one and did that typical dancing on a ball thing like a show dog or a slapstick clown. That was hilarious on its own. But then when she had managed to extricate herself from the ball, she stood on another one right in front of her. I thought that shit only happened in the Marx Brothers. It was a glorious day. I was in the 3rd grade and I had done the most important thing in my short life by then by becoming friends with the popular girls. The popular girls and I grew to be very close and would hang out all the time. One day, head popular girl summons us and says we're going behind the hills. The other damsels hop along toward the hills together while I stay skeptically trudge along. Once there, all the girls lie down on the grass behind the hills. So they are not visible by the narcs that patrol recess and make you stand at the wall if you misbehave. Once they've all laid down, I can't help but ask, what are you guys doing? And head popular girl responds with we're having sex with our imaginary boyfriends. I laugh uncomfortably. And they actually proceed to have sex. With her. At 8 years old. Just writhing on the floor and not even knowing what they're doing and making sounds. Quite funny. Very uncomfortable. I was at a sci-fi convention with a friend and we get on the hotel elevator. A 10-year-old, or so, girl gets undressed as 7 of 9 and these 2 fat guys dressed as Jedi behind us start mocking her for not having the goods to fill out that costume. Fucking gross. My friend, who is also rather large, turns around, looks them up and down, and starts heckling them for being fat Jedi. Can't you use the force to put those fucking M&Ms down? The pizza's calling you to the dark side. Do you have to use the force to get your fat ass into those robes? Those aren't even Jedi robes. Those are the hotel bathrobes. Everyone in the elevator was cracking up. And when the girl got off on the next floor she had a great big grin on her face. Turned around and high-fived my friend on her way off the elevator. The fat Jedi got off on the next floor as fast as they could. It wasn't even the floor they were supposed to get off. I hope I can describe this to be as hilarious as it actually was. After a night at the bars, it was after 2 and I was waiting for my food order at Jack in the Box with all the other hungry drunk people. A girl next to me obviously can't wait for her food, so she takes out her iPhone, opens a packet of hot sauce, and squeezes it onto her iPhone like a plate and takes a huge lick. She had no idea what she was doing and one of her friends had to pull the iPhone out of her hand mid-lick. I still laugh uncontrollably when I think of the visual. I was at a concert with a friend of mine and she had to go to the bathroom, so I waited outside. Now the bathroom in this place is located by an escalator. I looked over to this obviously very drunk woman pissing underneath of the escalator. All I could think was wow, but then as she proceeds to stand up she slips in her own piss and lands flat on her face in the piss. I lost it. Best concert ever. A couple summers ago I was driving through the city with all the windows down with my cousin. For some reason, I had the most intense, loud sneeze of my life. And a car 4 lanes away going the opposite direction screamed "Bless you" out of his car as he drove by. Single mom at the beach with her I would estimate 3-year-old son. The kid is having a very good day playing in the sand. All of a sudden she gets a phone call and starts yelling at who I presume is the father. Has a fit. And grabs the kid and starts telling him it is time to leave. She is pulling him along by the arm and he getting dragged and she is yelling on the phone. Finally the kid lets go and he turns around to yell at him it is time to leave and to hurry up. The kid standing there in his water wings, sun hat, and holding his yellow sand bucket yells at his mom. I am a kid. My legs aren't long enough. I can't move that fast. What do you expect? Everyone around just started cracking up. In high school me and my mates were stood in a circle just talking, waiting for the teacher to turn up to let us inside. This was after dinner break, or lunch, and hundreds of seagulls flocked to the playgrounds to scavenge food. One of those seagulls shat on my mate's face. My mate, being quite hard, read a bit of a jock few merkins, shouted, alright, who fucking spat on me? You're fucking dead. We were on the floor laughing and then the realization on his face when he knew it wasn't spit and in fact bird shite. He actually said it's not spit, is it? With a grin on his face. I still crack up now thinking about it. Edit. I know what a merkin is. We use it as a slang term round these parts. If I found Reddit and made an account it's pretty certain I know what a cunt-tuppe is. I subscribe to WTF and I'd wager there's a subreddit specifically for merkins. While on a motorcycle trip across half the country my father and I witnessed the tail end of a possible road rage incident. We were riding up the highway when one car passed a pickup and didn't think much of it. About 5 minutes later we round a bend and there are both cars parked on the shoulder. Drivers in mid-fisticuffs. As we passed I looked over and the fighters were so involved in their battle they forgot to take the terrain into account. Fell and rolled down a slightly steep hill together. It wasn't until we stopped for a break about an hour later that my dad laughs and says, oh, and what the fuck was that fight about anyway? I had forgotten about it until then and all I saw in my mind was those two bozos tumbling down a hillside and kicking up a dust cloud. Fucking New Mexico. My brother and his friends were really into wild animal fighting videos online. When they were freshmen in high school they spread the word about an after-school fight between a boa constrictor and a student. People showed up. The boa was one of the guys wearing a puffy green jacket with the sleeves tied behind his back. Very excited and repeatedly running at the other friend, who was just annoyed and telling him to stop. I was sitting at some traffic lights a few weeks ago and a guy on a fancy racing bicycle rode up onto the traffic island to wait to cross. Except he forgot he was wearing those shoes which clip into the pedals. So he stopped, balanced for a second, and then just toppled over. At that moment the light changed to green so I had to drive off. One of the funniest things I ever saw happened across a hot dog stand set up for some charity thing. My buddy and I get a hot dog because they were only $1. He says, what's this for? She says. Schizophrenia awareness, he says. Well, better give me 2 than he only said it because he wanted to help out but she had a look on her face like you wouldn't believe. My cousin yelling ER. Like Lil Jon and the guy in the car next to us responding with okay. Dogs usually don't make a noise when they fart. But when mine got up from the kitchen floor she must have really pushed because she blasted a loud one. Since she had never heard a noise come out of her ass she freaked out and sprinted down the hallway. Paused. And pinned her ears back looking around to see if anything was chasing her. That was nearly 8 years ago and I still haven't seen anything funnier than that. When I was a toll collector on the Golden Gate, I kept a jar of grape up and mustard in my booth waiting, just waiting, until sure enough some guy in a convertible with his giggling girlfriend sitting next to him said, pardon me, would you have any grape uppin'? I pulled out the jar and, but of course, their expressions were priceless and we all got a good laugh out of it. For those of you too young to remember, here is the commercial. http://www.youtube.com/watch?vic_hhyxqsse. The other night, my boyfriend and I were bored and stoned so we decided to wreak some havoc. My friend had bought me a laser pointer for Christmas so I could play with my cat with it and instead, we decided to point it at people outside our apartment complex. Just so you know, We live in Atlanta, right next door to a liquor store and in a pretty shady part of town. My boyfriend decides to point it at this guy who was clearly cracked out. This man starts freaking out. He just stops in his tracks and holds his hands up in the air and screams, "Put the lasers on me. Come on, white devils. Put the lasers on me. Now." We are about 5 stories up so he couldn't see us. But he just goes on this rant for about 10 minutes screaming about lasers and to bring it. I know it's pretty awful to mess with someone like that. But at the time I could not control myself from laughing hysterically. Only after the laughter subsided did we realize he was probably terrified and thought he was about to get sniped or something. Oops. On a dry summer night a couple of years ago, a bunch of friends and I were doing mushrooms and drinking in a park. We were at the bottom of a hill with trees and were there for hours. Every time one of us went up the hill into the trees to pee, it made pee mud. So the next person to pee would pee a little higher up. We even had a roll of toilet paper on a branch. Well, after a couple hours of drugs and booze, one of my girl friends went up the hill to pee and slipped in the pee mud. She's a longboarder so she has pretty good balance even when intoxicated. And we all hear wah, wahoo, and she comes majestically sliding down the hill out of the trees, in a half squat with her pants around her knees, without falling. I was laughing so hard I was crying at that one. And I'll never forget it. I was sitting at the table with my mom and my 3-year-old niece. And out of nowhere my niece looks at my mom and says, "Everybody's looking at you because you're weird." Definitely one of the funniest things I've ever heard. This could be good. For my part, I was once in a classroom when in the middle of the lecture some kid in the front row got a phone call. He stood up, said loudly, "I'll be there right away," ripped off his hoodie revealing a cape and a Superman S. He then ripped away his velcro pants and whooshed up the stairs and out the door. Everyone was dead silent. The professor, who is quite funny, then remarked, "Thank God he's catching up with the times." A girl peeing in the bushes, big street with bushes in the middle. When she noticed there was a street on the other side and saw me, she stood up, excused herself but lost her balance. She tried to walk but with her pants around her ankles she stumbled for about 15 meters in slow motion only to end back in the bushes where she peed. A lot of these seem like had to be their moments but I still enjoy reading them. Substitute high school chemistry teacher demonstrating reaction between calcium carbide and water. Test for the presence of acetylene with burning splint. Experiment instructions emphasized multiple times that only a single crystal of calcium carbide should be used. Arsehole poured the whole bottle into the petri dish and then sent the class note to the office when he tried to interrupt the guy. When he actually tested for acetylene, his whole upper body was engulfed in a fireball that shot up, hit the ceiling, and left a black soot ring. The guy was okay, except every hair on his head had been singed off. I once saw a man fall down an escalator that was moving up in Las Vegas. It takes a moment to picture this, but it was hilarious. The man was clearly drunk out of his mind and just started rolling down the stairs, very slowly. It was so slow, in fact, that the escalator was keeping up with him. So he was basically just tumbling in place. He got up a good bit of momentum and reached the bottom, at which point the escalator took him back to the top. And the whole process started over again. 2 girls ran up to help him. They were not dressed to save a person. They realized this was a 250-270 ball of humanity, and decided to run away down the uphill escalator. It was like watching Indiana Jones. After about 90 seconds, he came to and got up, looking around like he hadn't fallen down an escalator. Then his buddies came walking back and asking where the hell he was. They had missed the most monumental moment of this guy's life. But I hadn't. TLDR. Man rolls down an uphill escalator, becomes Indiana Jones Boulder. In high school chemistry, we used to play the plunger game during homeroom where we'd toss a plunger in the air for various numbers of rotations and try to have it land stuck to the floor. One day as the tosses were getting a bit extreme in the high-ceilinged lab, one guy tossed it a bit too high and it landed on top of one of the light fixtures, which was amusing enough in itself. Later in the class, We were back in the lab. The teacher was a bald, red-faced, heavily mustached man and was in the middle of explaining our experiment when the plunger teeters off of the light fixture and plants itself directly atop his head. The combination of the perfect splunk and the sight of him staring up at the lightning rod on top of his head in stunned silence was too much to handle. Last Halloween, my girlfriend and I were getting some late night Del Taco. As we get our food and pull through the drive-thru, I see a car parking on the street in front. The car is decked out in Green Bay Packer gear. Wisco license plate. With an Aaron Rodgers sticker on the hood. So naturally, as I pulled out into the street, I yelled, "Go Bears." The guy stood up out of his car with a ref jersey and high heels on and yelled in the most fabulous gay voice, "I'm a replacement ref." We laughed so hard as I sped away. An ex-girlfriend and I were play fighting using our words, calling each other names and whatnot, but none of it serious. She had said something along the lines of calling me stupid or idiotic, then turned around and walked right into the door frame. Literally fell to the ground laughing and cracking up. My friend and his girlfriend recently got engaged. As an engagement gift, a bunch of us got together to buy a portrait for them. We bought a portrait from this guy named Picasso, who is famous for drawing portraits with his dick. The portrait even came with a video of him drawing it with his penis. Neither one of them has ever seen this video. When we gave it to them, they were really excited. We told them that the paints had a taste to them, and that they should give it a lick and smell it. They must have tried licking that stupid fucking portrait for at least 5 minutes before giving up. They currently have their portrait hanging in their living room, above the fireplace. We do not plan to give them the DVD of him painting their faces with his wang for at least a few years. So every time one of us comes over, we get a nice chuckle at the dick painting they have so proudly hung on their wall. What's the best prank you've ever heard of, seen, experienced? So I'm sitting outside of Bodine Sourdough Bakery in San Francisco near the Fisherman's Wharf, and see the guy come out with one of their bread bowls full of soup. Now if you've never been here, let me tell you, the seagulls are everywhere and pretty aggressive about trying to get your food. So the guy goes and sits down and starts eating his clam chowder, and the birds are everywhere, squawking like seagulls do. And you can see it's irritating this guy. So he makes the mistake of tearing off a piece of bread and throwing it to the gulls. He thought it was bad before, but once they knew they could get food out of him, he was surrounded. So one of the seagulls lands near the guy and is standing with its back to him about 5 feet away. The guy gets up, walks over and kicks the shit out of this bird. As soon as he turns around, he realizes this was a mistake. I would say there were 50 seagulls on this guy's food. He then screams, "Oh, I see how it is. You send your retarded friend to distract me while you sons of bitches enjoy my food." It was quite funny. TL. Dr. Seagulls are jerks. I worked at Santa's Village, a downmarket amusement park, in the 80s. See Adventureland for an exact replica of the scene. Standing in my carnival game booth, I watched a kid stagger off the spinning teacup ride a good distance away, and then veer dizzily this way and that until he wound up directly in front of my booth, at the very center of my field of vision. He paused a second, puked up everything he ever ate in his entire life, and then staggered out of frame. It was like this perfectly choreographed little movie scene I can still play in my head. Thank you, 80s kid. You were, and still are, hilarious. I was at camp as a kid one summer, and the tedious counselor was telling a story. Everyone thought he was boring, but for once, he had our attention. We stood in a circle in some woods, watching as his tale telling became more animated due to our attention. At a climactic moment of his story, he pointed skyward and inclined his head, saying, "And I looked up." At that moment, a bird flew over and shat on his forehead. I thought I would stop breathing from laughing so hard. My brother slammed a door on his head because, according to him, my arm speed was greater than my head speed. If you want to get nothing in return, you can like and join my Discord. There is a link in the description.